4 separate occasions, 4 separate years, 4 separate rooms, a press conference, a state dinner, a bilateral meeting, a cabinet briefing. The same sentence, delivered each time with the flat certainty of a man reciting a fact he has never once considered checking. And on the night the birth certificate appeared under the lights of the Ed Sullivan Theater, the sentence encountered the one thing it had spent 4 years successfully avoiding. The room at the Ed Sullivan Theater is already quiet when the camera catches Colbert mid-sentence, his right hand descending toward the desk with the unhurried precision of a man who has placed things on desks before and knows exactly what the placement produces. His fingers find the edge of the single sheet of paper. The audience, 700 people who arrived expecting a monologue, has gone still in the specific way that an audience goes still when it recognizes that what is happening on the stage in front of it is not the thing it was told was happening. A woman in the third row has stopped unwrapping the cough drop she has been working on for 40 seconds. A man 4 seats to her left has his phone face down on his knee, forgotten. The floor director, standing at his mark stage left with a clipboard he has not consulted in 6 minutes, is watching the desk. Colbert sets the paper down. The cameras zoom in. The room reads what the cameras are reading. But to understand what happened in that moment, and what made the infrastructure of the claim collapse so completely when it finally met the document, you have to go back 4 years to the first time Donald Trump said his father was born in Germany. The year was 2018. The room was a CBS News interview. The question was about his family's background, framed in the warm, biographical register that pre-election profile coverage typically uses. Not adversarial, not investigative. The kind of question a subject answers on autopilot because it is the kind of question that requires no defense preparation. Trump said his father was born in Germany. He said it with the specific confidence of a man stating a family fact he has carried for decades. The way you state things you learned at a dinner table and have never had reason to verify because they have never been questioned. The interviewer did not correct him. The program aired. The claim entered the record. In 2019, a separate interview, a different room, a different network. The same claim. In 2020, a third occasion. In a press briefing, with reporters in the room, the same sentence landed with the same flat certainty, as if the previous 2 corrections, noted in the record by journalists and fact-checkers, never acknowledged by the administration, had not occurred. 4 times across 4 years, the President of the United States told the public, in settings ranging from domestic network interviews to diplomatic contexts, that his father had been born in Germany. Fred Trump was born in the Bronx, New York, on October 11, 1905. The fact is not obscure. It is not buried in archives that require specialist access. It appears in his obituaries, in newspaper archives, in official records that have been publicly accessible for decades. It was not hidden. It was simply never checked against the sentence that kept being said in its place. Then came the night of the birth certificate. Colbert walks the full width of the stage before sitting, not the quick, efficient transit of a host moving between positions, but the deliberate walk of a man who wants the audience to register the distance between the door and the desk, between the entrance and the document, already waiting on it. He moves the way a surgeon moves toward a table. Not slowly for effect, but slowly, because the thing he is about to do requires the room to be ready before he begins. He sits. He adjusts nothing, both hands flat on the desk. He looks at the camera. He says, "The President told the Chancellor of Germany today that his father was born in Germany." He says it in the flat, documentary register of a man reading a sentence from a transcript he is holding rather than a sentence he is constructing. He says it once. He does not editorialize. He does not reach for the paper yet. He lets the sentence sit in the room the way a sentence that does not require commentary sits, completely, without motion, taking up the specific amount of space that a false statement occupies when it is read back in a room that already contains the correction. He says, his father was not born in Germany. Then he reaches for the paper. The reach is slow, not performed slowness, the functional slowness of a man lifting something he intends to hold steadily. He picks it up. He holds it at the angle that the cameras can read. He says, "This is Fred Trump's birth certificate." He says it in the voice of a man reading the label of an item in an evidence inventory. He says, "Bronx, New York, October 11th, 1905. He places it on the desk so the cameras can zoom in. He says, "Not Germany, not a wonderful place in West Germany, New York." A man in the 5th row leans forward until his elbows find his knees. A woman 2 rows behind him presses her fingers flat against her closed mouth. The room does not laugh. It makes the low, sustained sound of 700 people receiving a correction and simultaneously doing arithmetic about how many rooms the uncorrected version had been said in, how many cameras it had been said in front of, how many heads of state had sat across a table from the sentence without anyone in the room having a birth certificate to place beside it. Colbert holds the document up again. He says, "The president has been asked about this on multiple occasions over the years. He says it without inflection. He says in 2018, the claim was made and noted. In 2019, the claim was made and noted. In 2020, the claim was made and noted." He says, "This is the fourth occasion." He says, "The birth certificate has not changed between the first occasion and the fourth." He says it the way a man reads a finding that is complete, not building towards something, not constructing a case that requires a conclusion, simply placing the final item in the infrastructure beside the items that preceded it and allowing the structure to be visible. He says, "I want to say something about what this particular claim is not." He says it with the specific precision of a man who has spent 20 minutes preparing the distinction he is about to make, and is now making it in the flattest available register so that it cannot be mistaken for editorializing. He says, "This is not a policy disagreement." He says, "This is not a matter of interpretation." He says, "It is not a case where reasonable people can examine the evidence and arrive at different conclusions." He says, "Fred Trump's birthplace is documented, confirmed, and verified across multiple official sources, and the verification has been available, in full, for longer than any of us have been watching this story." He says, "What makes this particular claim worth examining is not the claim itself." He says, "It is the pattern." He picks up the document again. He says, "The man who told you he attended Wharton, top of his class." He says it in the inventory register, placing each item beside the previous one without acceleration. "The man who told you he has a perfect memory. The man who submitted to cognitive tests and described the results as extraordinary. The man who has told foreign leaders, in diplomatic settings, while conducting the foreign policy of the United States, that his father was born in a country his father was not born in. That man has been holding this birth certificate's correction in the public record for 4 years. He places the document back on the desk. He says, "The infrastructure of a repeated false statement is not always deception." He says it the way he says things that are both precise and devastating, evenly, without pause, in the register of a forensic examiner reading a finding to a room rather than a commentator constructing an argument for one. He says, "Sometimes it is something quieter." He says, "Sometimes it is a man who learned a sentence at a family dinner table, said it in public, was never corrected in the moment, and kept saying it, not because he chose to lie, but because the sentence had never once been placed beside the document that contradicted it." He holds up the birth certificate one final time. He says, "Until tonight." The room breaks. Not the sharp crack of a punchline landing, but the long building wave of an audience that has been given permission to release something it has been holding for the length of a segment that moved, without any single dramatic escalation, from a sentence to a document to a pattern to a finding. The applause is not wild. It is deliberate. It is the specific sound of people putting their hands together, because the thing they just watched did not require a punchline to complete it. The document was the punchline. The 4 years were the setup. A camera operator who has worked the Ed Sullivan Theater for 11 years later said she kept the shot on the birth certificate for 6 seconds after Colbert moved to the next segment because she could not find a reason to cut away from something that was still doing the thing it had been placed on the desk to do. By the following morning, the clip had been segmented into 7 independent pieces, each spreading at a different speed across different platforms. The one that traveled farthest, faster than the birth certificate reveal, faster than the 4-year pattern recitation, was the 4 seconds of silence between the sentence and the placement of the document. 700 people in a theater, not breathing, while a man held a piece of paper at the angle cameras could read. Trump posted 6 times before midnight. He called the segment fake news, a witch hunt, a disgusting hit piece constructed by enemies of the state. He said Colbert had no ratings. He said the network was dying. He said the birth certificate was probably forged. He did not address what the birth certificate said. He did not address the Bronx. He did not address October 11th, 1905. The document is in the public record. The infrastructure is visible. The 4 years are documented, and a piece of paper that has existed since 1905, confirming a fact that has never changed, spent one night under the lights of a theater on Broadway, being held by a man in glasses who had the specific, practiced patience to let it speak without assistance. The people who subscribe to this channel don't come for drama. They come for the moments nobody else is willing to show, the ones where the most complete available argument against a decade of unchecked repetition is not a rebuttal, not a debate, not an editorial, just a document placed on a desk under good light. Subscribe, turn on notifications. The next truth is already on the table.